So one question, one statement which has come in the recent UPSC mains general essay paper is best lessons are learned through bitter experiences. But remember, always we don't learn from the bitter experiences. There are some who don't learn. There are some countries who don't learn, but majority of we as individuals, majority countries as countries, they learn. I will also give examples. So there are countries with bitter experience, but they have not learned anything out of it. So with respect to introduction and conclusion, I have sent the PDFs for you, so you can go through that. Take the example of France. So France witnessed the French Revolution in the year 1789. So after the French Revolution, after the year 1789, from then till now, France had got 5 republican constitutions. 5 republican constitutions. What do you mean by republican constitution? France is a republic, India is a republic, USA is a republic. So in any country, if the head of the nation state is elected, either directly or indirectly, then that nation state is called a republican nation state. It is opposite of monarchy. For example, take France. In France, the French president is directly elected by people. The French president is the head of the French nation state, and he is directly elected by the people. So France is a republic. Take India and USA. In India and also in USA, the president is elected, but not directly by the people, through an electoral college. But doesn't matter whether the election is direct or indirect, doesn't matter, it has to be election. So in India and USA, the Indian president and the American president are indirectly elected, but elected. So that's why India is a republic, USA is also a republic. So monarchy was abolished. You know that before 1789, France was ruled by a dynasty called Bourbon dynasty. Bourbon dynasty. So this was the dynasty which was ruling over France, and the rulers of the Bourbon dynasty are autocratic, absolute, dictatorial. So because of the prevailing situations then, there was a lot of inequality in the society. There are 3 kinds of social groups in French society then: nobility, priestly class, commoners. So the nobility and priestly class, they were enjoying a lot of privileges. Much of the taxation burden is on the commoners, and the commoners were not enjoying any liberty and equality. There was no social mobility for them. And the rulers of the Bourbon dynasty, they were spending money very lavishly for the wars and for other purposes. That led to a lot of debt in France, a lot of burden on the common man. So this all led to French Revolution in 1789. So after the French Revolution, there were 5 republican constitutions. If you take the first 4 republican constitutions, France had parliamentary democracy. So total 5 republican constitutions. The latest one is after the Second World War. After the Second World War, France has come up with the 5th republican constitution, under which France was made a semi-presidential executive, neither fully presidential democracy nor fully parliamentary democracy, a mix of presidential and parliamentary executives. That was the present constitution. But before the 5th republican constitution, there were 4 constitutions. In all the 4 republican constitutions, unlike India, we had only 1 constitution in the last 75 years. But between 1789 and the Second World War, between this period, France had 5 constitutions. I am speaking about the first 4 constitutions. In the first 4 constitutions of France, they have provided for parliamentary democracy. And the problem with parliamentary democracy in France is there are multiple political parties in France. So after the general elections get over to the parliament, to the lower house, no single party is able to secure majority of the seats in the lower house. And as a result, the governments were not stable. So France witnessed a lot of political instability when it had parliamentary democracy, under the first four republican constitutions. You see the frequent rise and fall of governments. So this experience taught French people that a parliamentary democracy doesn't suit them. So that's why under the fifth republican constitution, they have given up parliamentary democracy and they chose a semi-presidential executive. So under the first four republican constitutions, France witnessed a lot of political instability. The executive branch suffered a lot. Do you know the average tenure of every government is hardly 7 to 8 months at one point of time, hardly 14 months at one point of time. So their experience taught them that parliamentary democracy doesn't suit them. Because if there are multiple political parties, at least if these political parties form into stable coalitions, for example, take India, we have NDA, UPA, NDA led by BJP, UPA led by Congress. If all the political parties form into one or two or three coalitions, then stable governments are possible. So there in France, under the first four republican constitutions, these political parties are not forming stable coalitions. And none of them are getting absolute majority of the seats in the lower house. And as a result, France witnessed a lot of political instability. This is their bitter experience. So what did they finally decide? After the Second World War in 1950s, when they had written a constitution for themselves, they have given up parliamentary democracy. They chose a mix of presidential democracy and parliamentary democracy. It is more a presidential democracy. So this example you can give. Then, take Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had better experiences, but it has not learned any lesson. That is for example, the constitution of Sri Lanka is unitary constitution. What do you mean by unitary constitution? A unitary constitution is one, which gives all the powers, executive, legislative, financial and judicial powers to the national government. So the provincial governments in Sri Lanka, they don't derive any authority from the constitution. What does that mean? In Sri Lanka, there are provincial governments, but they derive their powers from the laws made by the national parliament. So it is at the sweet will of the central government. And you know the Tamilians are a majority in northeastern province. And for example, compare this with India. In India, the state governments, they derive their authority from the constitution. We have something called a state list. There are 59 items in the state list. With respect to all the 59 items in the state list, states are supreme. They are not dependent on the center for this power. But this is not the case in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, there are provincial governments, but these provincial governments, they don't derive any authority from the constitution. For their power, they are dependent on the central government. And many a times, Tamilians were not given autonomy, self-rule. What is the result? Birth of a dreaded terrorist organization, LTTE, Liberation of Tigers of Tamil Eelam. It has destroyed property for almost 2 decades, a kind of civil war in Sri Lanka, destruction of property. We lost even our Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi because of LTTE. They also targeted many presidents of Sri Lanka. This is the bitter experience which Sri Lankans have witnessed because of having a unitary constitution. India many a times advised Sri Lanka to go in for a federal constitution. So a federal constitution provides for sharing of political power between the central and provincial governments. So on the subjects which are of national importance, the central government will be powerful. On the subjects which are of regional importance, the states will have a lot of autonomy. The provincial governments will have a lot of self-rule. But that Sri Lanka has not done that. So there is no guarantee for peace and stability for Sri Lanka even today. Tomorrow, if one more dreaded terrorist organization takes both under a able leadership, history will repeat. So Sri Lanka, what it should have done, based on its bitter experience of working of unitary constitution, it should have made its constitution converted into a federal constitution. But that was not done. So that's one more example which you can give. Then, as you said, Disaster Management Act, DM Act. In India, in the initial decades of independence, we never focused on preventing and mitigating disasters. We waited for the disasters to hit India and after the disaster hits India, we use it to respond to that. But in our policy making domain, we have not focused adequately on prevention of the disasters wherever it is possible, or at least reducing the impact of disasters. That's what we say, mitigation. And in fact, we did not have any law till 2005. The Constitution of India came into force in the year 1950. So for almost 55 years, we did not have any law to deal with the disaster management. And we had worst experiences, and that led to enactment of a law at the national level. So as I said earlier, 2004, India witnessed a tsunami, Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, a major devastating natural disaster. Then in 2001, we have Bhuj earthquake. Again, this was an earthquake of very devastating impact. Then in 1999, we had Orissa super cyclone. So these are three major natural disasters which have hit India with a lot of destruction and devastation. So this finally made Government of India to come up with a legislation at the national level, which we call DM Act 2005. So Disaster Management Act 2005. Remember, in the 7th schedule, under Article 246, List 3 is concurrent list. So in List 3, there is one entry: Social Security, Unemployment, Insurance. Under this entry, the law is made. So Disaster Management Act of 2005 was enacted under an entry in the concurrent list by the Union government. So in other words, for India to enact Disaster Management Act, it took three severe disasters. So Orissa super cyclone, Bhuj earthquake, and Indian Ocean tsunami were the eye openers for the governments at both union and at the state level. So it took three severe natural disasters for India to decisively act and come up with a Disaster Management Act of 2005. So that's one more example which you can give. Then let us take the model of development itself in India. We know that India was under the British rule for almost 2 centuries, and that was the period of colonialism and imperialism. So Britishers came to India with the goal of doing trade with India and making profits. But in course of time, they also got an opportunity to conquer India, and they also became rulers. Initially, English East India Company came as a trading body. Later on, it became an administrative body. It became a political power. So our experience is, before India's independence, when India was under the British rule, it is the foreign capital which came to India in search of profits, which led to our suffering and exploitation. As soon as India got on independence on 15th August 1947, we are scared of depending upon the foreign capital, foreign investment, because we had a fear that we may lose our hard-won freedom by depending on foreign capital for India's development. Because if developed countries start spending money and investing money in India, they may dictate policies to India. So that will compromise our freedom. So that's why our history taught, our experience under the British colonial rule taught that we should not go for foreign capital. We should not go for capitalist model of development. So what did we do? We chose a socialist model of development. So from 1950 to 1990, India had a socialist model of development. What is socialist model of development? Public sector is given lot of importance. Public sector dominating the Indian economy. Public sector reaching the commanding heights of the economy. So in the initial decades, first 1 or 2 decades, the high priority given to the public sector has really improved the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, economic infrastructure, and social infrastructure. But in course of time, because of the monopoly of the public sector, because of the misuse of monopoly, because of license, permit, quota Raj, because for the public sector enterprises there was no real competition. So there is no incentive for the public sector to produce goods and services of high quality at a greater speed at a low cost. So because of this, by 1990 we reached a situation wherein we are investing a lot of money in the public sector enterprises, and the public sector enterprises have become white elephants. They are eating away the resources of the state but not generating adequate returns. That led to balance of payment crisis. So we felt that enough is enough. Socialist model of development has failed to deliver economic growth and create wealth in this country. So in 1990s, we chose LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. LPG model of development. See, every time when we learn from the history, we are getting a different lesson. When India was under the British rule, we felt that a capitalist mode of development may not be good. It may be risky for us to depend on the foreign capital. So we started off a socialist model of development. Even that also did not yield benefits. We were forced to get back to the earlier model of development by 1990s. So history can teach us different lessons at different points of time. And from 1990 till today, in the last more than 3 decades, what is our experience? In the last 3 decades, because of economic reforms, because of liberalization, privatization, globalization, private sector from within the country, from outside, it started coming to Indian economy and investing in Indian economy. Because of competition between different service providers, because the private sector is after profit. If you want to make profit, you need to produce the goods and services at a lower cost, of higher quality, with greater speed. So this increased the efficiency of the Indian economy. In the last more than 3 decades, wealth creation in this country has increased phenomenally. Do you know the size of the budget in the 1990s? The size of the budget of the union government in 1990, 50,000 crores. What is the size of the union budget today? 50 lakh crores. Because of economic reforms, there was a greater investment coming to India. There was a very high increase in the production of goods and services. If more goods and services are produced, and then the taxes are levied by the government, there was an increase in the tax revenues of the union government and the state government. It led to creation of wealth. It led to reducing poverty. According to National Multi-Dimensional Poverty Index of Niti Aayog, in the last 2 to 3 decades, more than 40 crore people of India, they have been lifted out of poverty. That's the number. In the last 2 to 3 decades, in the last 20 to 30 years, more than 40 crore people of India, they have been lifted out of poverty, which means economic reforms have delivered wealth creation in this country. They have reduced the poverty. But again, there are problems. What are the problems? Inequality. Inequality has grown. So there was one organization by name Oxfam International. Oxfam International. So the study done by Oxfam International says that in India there is growing inequality across the states, across the regions, across the social groups, across the individuals. Today, the wealth of the top 10 billionaires in India is bigger than the entire union budget. 1% of the population in India controls 40% of the wealth in this country. And this growing inequality is also not good for democracy. In the last 30 years, of course we were able to create a lot of wealth. We were able to lift more than 40 crore people out of poverty. But these are the positive signs. The negative sign is growing inequality. So this you can give as an example. Best lessons are learnt through bitter experiences. 1950 to 1990, though our intentions are good, what are the intentions? By the time we got independence, India was a very poor country with a lot of illiteracy, backwardness. We wanted to create an egalitarian society, an equal society. What does socialism stand for? Socialism stands for public sector domination over the material resources so that every citizen gets benefited. The intent is good, but the outcomes are poor. So the socialist model of development has miserably failed in creating economic growth and in addressing poverty. So based on that experience, we have switched over to LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. This you can give as an example. Then 1962, India-China war. So what is the experience? India suffered a humiliating defeat in the hands of China. That's a very bitter experience. Nehru was also very much unhappy because he wanted to have friendship with China. So he came up with Panchashil. He never expected that China will betray India. So that's our bitter experience. Then what did we learn from that? We developed atomic weapons, nuclear weapons. So Operation Smiling Buddha, when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, we have made nuclear tests, and today India is a nuclear weapon state. Nuclear weapon state. Of course, we had a border skirmishes with China, but they are of small size. Can China dare today to India to have a full-blown war with India? Unlike in the time of 1962, today can China dare to have a full-scale war with India? Cannot, because India is a nuclear weapon state. It can threaten China that we can use nuclear weapon if you try to attack us. So we have built deterrence. What is deterrence? Creating fear in the mind of the enemy. And this is based on our experience in 1962. India had a very bitter experience of having lost in the 1962 India-China war. So that made us to develop nuclear weapons in course of time. So this is the history, this is the lesson which we have learned from our bitter experience. It is not only that. Take Ambedkar, example of Ambedkar. So Ambedkar, since his childhood, has suffered a lot of discrimination in the name of untouchability. So what is his experience has taught him? He became a warrior, he became a crusader against caste inequalities. He fought for abolition of untouchability. And today we had a constitution where untouchability is abolished and true rights, liberties and freedoms are given to every citizen. We have the world's largest reservation system in this country. Tribals, Dalits, OBCs, economically weaker sections, today they enjoy the benefit of reservation in government jobs and also in government educational institutions. So this speaks about the principle of equality. So Indian society was essentially an unequal society. That's why B.R. Ambedkar said, democracy in India is a top dressing on Indian soil which is essentially undemocratic. So by the time we adopted democracy as an instrument, society was unequal. There were gender inequalities, there are caste inequalities, there are inequalities on the lines of religion as well. But the constitution as an instrument has transformed Indian society through its institutions and processes. So that's one more experience. Ambedkar, when he was young, from childhood till he grew up, he had experienced the worst kinds of discrimination in the name of caste. He was born into a untouchable caste. When he was getting educated in the school, he cannot draw water from the tap directly. The peon has to open it, he has to drink water. If the peon doesn't come that day, he cannot take water. Without water, he cannot take food also. So this is the sorry state of affairs. He went to Columbia University in USA, got well educated. He came back and wanted to serve in Baroda princely state. There again he suffered discrimination. So this made his mind very strong that he has to do something about fighting this untouchability and caste inequalities. So the worst experiences, the bitter experiences which Ambedkar has undergone gave him an opportunity to shape the constitution of India in the direction of an egalitarian society, undoing untouchability and caste inequalities. India is a secular nation state, which means India is against caste inequalities. Indian constitution is against gender inequalities. It is also against inequalities on the basis of religion. So secularism doesn't mean only equal rights to the people of different religions. It also speaks about gender equality. It also speaks about caste equality. So the bitter experiences of Ambedkar was responsible for writing a constitution which had transformed Indian society in the direction of an equal society, where liberty, equality and fraternity were given a lot of importance. That also you can give as an example. And take food security. In the initial decades of independence, India was not self-sufficient in food grain production. We were hand to mouth. We were dependent on United States of America for the need of our food grains. There was a program called PL 480. Unless the ship from America comes to India, we are not food secure. This is our experience. And there was a point wherein USA was dictating terms to India's foreign policy. But later on, we had a green revolution. Dr. Swaminathan, C. Subramaniam, all these people, they provided leadership for green revolution. And the green revolution in the 1960s and 70s made India food secure nation. So that's one example. Then another small example, Chandrayaan 2 was a failure. We have learned from the mistakes, launched a Chandrayaan 3, that was successful program. Then if you take famines, do you know that before India's independence, crores of people were died in the famines, both in all India famines and also famines at the regional level. Crores, not lakhs, thousands, crores of people. But did that happen after independence? It never happened. In the last 75 years, we don't hear people getting killed in lakhs and crores because of famines. So one of the biggest achievements which Indian Republic has made is dealing with famines, abolition of famines in post-independent India. Why that was made possible? Because of our experience under British rule, where famines led to killing of crores of people. After India's independence, we have come up with green revolution, made India as a food secure nation. We have come up with the world's largest PDS system. And in addition to that, Nehru got constructed many multi-purpose irrigation projects like Bakra Nangal, like Hirakud Dam, and he called them as modern temples. So because of the policies which were pursued after India's independence, India was able to prevent famines recurring in India. How did we do this? Because of the bitter experiences which we had when we were under the British rule. Then, so if you see the history of India, in the ancient period we had a dynasty called Mauryan dynasty which ruled over the entire Indian subcontinent. So our history says that when the central government is strong, our independence is preserved. When the Mauryan dynasty became weak, many foreigners came and invaded India. Same is the story in the medieval period. So Mughals, Delhi Sultans, they were all foreigners who came to India and invaded India. So when we framed a constitution for independent India, we have given highest priority to national unity. Why did we choose parliamentary democracy? Because parliamentary democracy allows for sharing of political power. If you can share political power, you can keep many social groups happy. This will promote national unity. So parliamentary democracy is taken to promote national unity. We chose federal constitution. A federal constitution provides for sharing of political power between the center and the states. So we can better meet regional aspirations through federal constitution. It promotes national unity. India became a federation to promote national unity. Similarly, India became a secular nation state. Under secular nation state, equal rights are given to people of different religious faiths. If equal rights are given, they would remain loyal to India. That will promote national unity. We went in for single citizenship. It promotes the concept of universal brotherhood. It will keep the country united. We went in for a federation with a strong central government. When the constitution was made, all the existing federations which were there till then, they had weak central governments. The powers of the central governments were very limited. But when we made a constitution for independent India, we have created a union list with more than 99 items. So the framers of the Indian constitution have envisaged a very strong central government. So this is again an experience. Our experience in the ancient period and the medieval period is whenever the central government is strong, our freedom is preserved. When the central government became weak, we lost our freedom. Same is the case in the modern period. How Britishers were able to conquer India? because there was no national unity. There were many native kingdoms fighting with each other. That gave an opportunity for the Britishers to conquer India. So our experience in the ancient, medieval and modern period before 1947 said that if you have a strong central government in India, that will protect and preserve your freedom and independence. That's why we created a constitution, we enacted a constitution which provided for a strong central government. This is also a lesson which we have learned from our own experiences. Then, even the establishment of UNO, United Nations Organization, the First World War, the Second World War led to a lot of destruction, devastation, loss of life and property. So this was a threat to humanity and the survival of humanity. So that all led to establishment of United Nations Organization. This was able to prevent the Third World War. So the establishment of UNO is out of the experience of countries which have suffered in the First World War and the Second World War. So that again you can give as an example. And you know that in Japan, at the time of Second World War, USA dropped atomic bombs in Japan. That led to again lot of destruction to life and property there. And people got affected because of this radioactivity which emerged out of atomic bombs. So that's the experience, bitter experience of Japan. So that finally led to regulating atomic weapons. That led to NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That also led to CTBT, Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So that is again an example. I told you about food security, Chandrayaan, famine, emergency provisions. So between 1775 and 1777, Mrs. Indira Gandhi has declared internal emergency on the ground of internal disturbance. That led to a lot of misuse of emergency powers by Mrs. Indira Gandhi government that posed a threat to rights and liberties of the people. So this bitter experience made us to amend the constitution in the form of 44th Amendment. So that the 44th Amendment to the Indian Constitution in 1978 has inserted several safeguards in the Constitution of India to prevent the possible misuse of emergency powers in the future. So that's again from experiences, bitter experiences. So I told you about Sri Lanka, I told you about France, I told you about socialism, I told you about disaster management, CTBT, NPT, UNO, Ambedkar, and again I told you about nuclear tests, then climate change and global warming. Initially, there was not enough evidence to say that climate change and global warming will pose a big threat to humanity. But now there is overwhelming evidence. Because of the impact of climate change and global warming, because of the increase in the average surface temperatures, many developing and developed countries were getting affected with devastating floods and very severe droughts. And now everybody has understood that climate change and global warming is a serious problem. Earlier there was a debate, now there was no debate. All the countries across the globe, they agree that climate change is a serious issue. Global warming is a serious issue. So now, on the answer to the problem of climate change, there are differences. It is the developed countries which are historically responsible for the problem. So the developing countries and underdeveloped countries want the developed countries to take greater responsibility. Developed countries are responsible for the problem, but it is the developing and underdeveloped countries which are the worst victims. So that's why there is a principle called common but differentiated responsibility. All should act, but the developed countries should take greater responsibility. This principle in the Paris Agreement, it has come out of our own experiences. Many countries, you have seen, even in India, Uttarakhand, there were flash floods, not once, many times. In the last 10 years, there is increasing phenomenon of urban flooding. Chennai, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Pune, many cities, again and again, Bangalore, they are witnessing urban flooding. This was not the case in the earlier decades. This is all because of climate change and global warming. So we all realize the problem of climate change and global warming. And we are acting on this problem. For example, India has come up with International Solar Alliance. We are focusing a lot on National Green Hydrogen Mission. We have a National Action Plan on Climate Change. Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi has given the slogan of life, sustainable lifestyles, lifestyle for environment. In 2021 in the Glasgow meet, he spoke about Panchamrut, 5 nectars for dealing with problem of climate change and global warming. We also created an International Solar Alliance to move to renewable energy in the form of solar energy. We are able to do all of this out of our own experiences of, bitter experiences of the impacts of climate change and global warming. That also we can discuss. Then again told you about COVID. So India has got very poor healthcare infrastructure. And when India was hit with COVID pandemic, our ability to respond to COVID with the existing infrastructure was very weak. That's why the 15th Finance Commission, which was appointed soon after the COVID, when we are in the COVID pandemic phase, it has given lot of priority to the healthcare sector. Earlier finance commissions have never given such priority to the healthcare sector. So you know, the unofficial figures, they say how many people have died in the COVID? More than 45 lakh people, they got killed in the COVID pandemic. So this was a mass mortalities because of COVID pandemic. The existing healthcare infrastructure was not able to meet the needs of more than 1 billion population. So that's why the 15th Finance Commission, headed by N.K. Singh in its report, has recommended establishment of a new All India service, All India Medical and Health Service. It also has given highest priority to health in that report. Out of the total grants which were given by the out of the total grants recommended by the Finance Commission to the states, 10% of the total grants were meant for healthcare sector alone. Then we can also speak about oil diplomacy of India. So India was asked, USA has asked India not to import crude oil from Iran, because Iran was developing nuclear weapons and USA has imposed sanctions on Iran. So we stopped importing oil from Iran. Then we started importing more and more oil from Russia. Now Trump says we should not export from Russia. If we listen to Trump, who is an unreliable partner for India, India's energy security will suffer. If India's energy security suffers, our economic growth will suffer. Our ability to address poverty will also suffer. So what India is saying? The strategy of multi-alignment. India will align with any country which suits to India's interests. Unless we take up this policy of multi-alignment, we cannot secure India's interests. We cannot rely on a country like USA, which is an unreliable partner. So that's one more example. So we have given a lot of examples. Naxalism as well. See, in India, in the tribal belt, because of underdevelopment and poor governance, we had this problem of Naxalism. At one point of time, Prime Ministers like Dr. Manmohan Singh said, Naxalism is the biggest threat to internal security. So now we have come up with, because if Naxalism poses as a biggest threat to internal security, if there is breakdown of law and order because of Naxalism in the states affected by Naxalism, nobody will come and invest in these states. If nobody would come and invest in these states, then there will be no development. That will be a threat to even Indian democracy. That's why Government of India has come up with some of the programs like a aspirational districts program, a aspirational blocks program, under which the central government is providing adequate funding for the districts which are affected with Naxalism, and a lot of money is being spent on physical infrastructure, economic infrastructure, and social infrastructure. Now these districts which are affected with left-wing extremism they are catching up with other districts which are better off. So this experience of the policy of aspirational districts program, aspirational block program, it has borne out of our bitter experience with Naxalism. It's not only that. Government of India has enacted two important legislations to deal with Naxalism. PESA Act in 1996, Forest Rights Act in 2006. Panchayat's extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996, it promises self-governance to the tribal people in the 5th scheduled areas. But unfortunately, this law is not implemented in letter and spirit. And if you take the Forest Rights Act 2006, it has given land rights and community rights for the tribals residing in the forested areas. So though tribals were Indian citizens, till 2006, their rights were not recognized. So that's why it was said that the objective of the Forest Rights Act is to undo, to correct historical injustices which are meted out to the tribal communities in this country. So these policies, they have borne out of the bitter experience of Naxalism leading to violence and underdevelopment and undermining democracy. So all these examples you can make use of to support this statement. What is that? Best lessons are learned through bitter experiences.